The reason why the United States government and secretly also the Israeli government was supporting Haile Selassie, you know, in his bid to keep Eritrea, was to keep control of that strait in friendly hands. They did not want it to fall into Muslim hands. And at that particular time, the Eritrean Liberation Front was viewed as a front for Islamic expansion and fundamentalism. That's the way the emperor carried to the American government.
Okay.
But however, now most people know that the leadership, really, of the Eritrean Liberation Front is predominantly Christian, led by Isaiah Afwerki, who is the current president of Eritrea. Though the United States is not friendly with Eritrea at the moment, which is one of the reasons why we turn to Djibouti. Today, the United States has, you know, troops stationed in Djibouti, in the guise of fighting anti-terrorism.
Okay.
But however, the reason for that is to keep an eye on the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, you know, to make sure that flow of oil is not disturbed through that channel.
They've already identified that as what they have to do. The United States has already identified that as what must be done. Is that what we're saying? Absolutely,
absolutely. And the Kagnu Air Force Base, you know, in Eritrea, which has Haile Selassie signed over to the U.S. in 1953, is no more very important as it used to, you know, with the proliferation of satellites and all that, though it's still important to an extent. You know. So here you have Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Eritrea, all poor and unstable because of political problems. You know, though in the past few years there has been an election in Djibouti now, you know, which is getting stable. Ethiopia has had elections, you know, democratic elections, so to speak, in the African context, and Eritrea is the odd guy out. But what is interesting is that when Afwerki came to power, he became the darling of the United States and Western European countries until he showed his true colors. You know, he is accused or alleged, you know, to have really started the war in 1998 with Ethiopia.
Okay.
You know, because of his own ambitions, and that war completely destroyed the Eritrean economy, which is still really up to today. You know, then you have the Sudan. The Sudan controls the water to the Nile water to Egypt. And what you have now is that the Egyptian government is opposed to Southern Sudan becoming independent because of the fear of the Christian government controlling the waters going to Egypt. That's been one of the problems too of solving the Sudanese problem. Whenever an agreement is signed, the Egyptians oppose it because they do not want an independent Southern Sudanese government. On the other hand, you have Somalia and Kenya having a conflict over ethnicity. There are Somalis who live in Kenya. The Somali government wants them as part of Somalia. There are Somalis who live in Ethiopia. The Somalis want them as part of their country. Somalis who live in Djibouti, Somalia also claims Djibouti. So part of the problem in that part of the world has been what you call Somali irredentist ambitions. They want to, you know, unify all the ethnic Somalis living in different countries surrounding Somalia. That was the reason for the two wars.
Now, why are so many people in these other countries from Somalia? I mean,
because of colonial artificial creation.
Okay.
You know, in Somalia itself, you can see, was under the control of almost three powers. The French, you know, Somaliland, you know, was is Djibouti. Then you have British Somaliland with this capital in Hargeisa, in northern Somalia. Then you have southern Somalia in Mogadishu with the Italian Somali land. So when independence was granted, these two, northern southern Somalia became one country. You know, even though they are the same ethnic group. But Somalia and Swaziland are the two most ethnically homogeneous countries in Africa. They are all the same, speak the same language in Somalia and Swaziland. You know, but you have clans within these so-called homogeneous ethnic groups, and that's why you had the Somali, you know, civil war. You know?
Well, Dr. LMadu, it seems that this is almost, seemed to be a very, almost an impossible kind of situation in terms of, because if we contend that the most important thing here is to create stability, it seems that it's a very, very difficult situation. I mean, what can be done in terms, we've got 2 minutes before this segment ends. You might want to start dealing with that. I mean, what could we do in terms of dealing with that?
Well, I think the governments themselves have to find a way to solve it. The problem is that most of the governments themselves themselves in Africa thrive on ethnic division so they can stay in power. Most of them are not interested in solving these problems because solving these problems means the rationale for them being in power will be removed. So they're interested in fanning these embers in order to stay in power. When we come to the elections in Kenya, then some of these things can be cleared out, and you can see how ethnicity plays a role in who governs. So that's really the major problem, is the leaderships themselves being able to break this cycle of ethnic dependency as a tool to political power.
And so over the last 45 seconds that we have for this particular segment, when we come back, we'll allow you to further elaborate upon this. But in the meantime, it seems that this is almost an impossible kind of situation, but it has been said that the United States is playing a real part in terms of holding up many of these governments that you think ought not to be in power. And so and when we come back, we want you to deal with that as an issue, because I think that if we're spending money to help to create the chaos that's there, and certainly we don't want to think that. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Today, we're talking to Dr. LMadu, and the topic is the strategic implications of the Horn of Africa. And of course, Dr. LMadu has given us some excellent information concerning some of the real problems dealing with this particular section of Africa, and how these problems are related all across the continent. And unless some solution, Dr. LMadu, can be found, I would imagine, then we will never be able to solve the problems of famine, starvation, and some of the other problems that simply plague the Horn. Is that what we're saying? Let's continue our conversation in reference to that.
Yeah, well, for example, Somalia exports currently, mostly its exports now comprise of bananas and livestock, since whatever was left of the economy before has been completely destroyed by the civil war. I take, for example, Ethiopia. 80% of Ethiopia's income comes from coffee, which was mortgaged to the Soviet Union by the Mengistu regime in order to receive billions of dollars in arms to fight the Eritrean and internal insurrections. Djibouti hardly exports anything apart from livestock. Most of its income comes from the railway, from Addis Ababa to Djibouti, which is charges, and also from tourism. Eritrea hardly exports anything either. After 1998-99 war, the economy is in shambles. The government of Eritrea rejects foreign aid, saying it can do without it, but experience has shown that it couldn't. So Sudan, is a little bit different because of the influx of oil revenue. So that's very important. The economic dependency of the Horn of Africa, is so much that without foreign aid, most of the economies will collapse completely.
Well, Dr. LMadu, since it seems that many of these problems can be said to go back to colonialism, it would seem to me that some of these former colonial countries would feel that they had some kind of responsibility. Is there any kind of forum whereby they can deal with this? Is there anything that you can do to bring them into this, a solution to this, these questions that are on the Horn?
Well, that would be very difficult to do. If you talk about irredentist ambitions, the AU African Union Charter, talks about the inviolability of frontiers. The United Nations Charter also talks about the inviolability of frontiers. Now, if a foreign government, starts saying, well, the Somali government who want you to forget about the other Somalis in Ethiopia or in Kenya, then they will be accused of interfering in the internal affairs of another sovereign country. You see, that's the problem. But at the same time, those countries will turn around and ask for aid, but they wouldn't want to take care, solving their own internal problems when they're advised to. And that's the problem. They shout, interference in their affairs, but at the same time, they turn around and ask you for money, just like you said a few minutes ago. Why should the U.S. be pumping money into these countries, you know, when they're not listening on how to bring their own people together to solve their internal problems. Most of those problems are solvable. But the thing is that the leaders themselves are so corrupt that they're interested in keeping, you know, control of their respective countries.
At any cost.
At any cost. Exploit the ethnic and racial and the religious sentiments of their people for their own advantage. That's what we see all over the continent.
Well, now, what do you see as some of the possible